Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our Navigating Special Needs series. I'm Mike Delgass, and I'm joined again by Richie M. and Heather Flanagan. In our earlier episodes, we talked about really important transitions, moving through schooling milestones, guardianship, and early adulthood. And today we're going to talk about another transition, the one that comes next as parents age. Um, as parents grow older, their role as primary caregiver or financial decision maker can begin to shift. And eventually, families face this question of what happens when that parent passes away or becomes incapable of continuing to make those decisions and cover those tasks. So it's a tough time. It's really emotional, but it's one where thoughtful planning can make a huge difference for everybody, especially for that loved one with special needs. So we'll explore how families can prepare for that transition and how to keep care and communication consistent along the way. Um, and in that context, Rich, can you tell us about the things we ought to do on the document side, updating estate plans, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So yeah, parents definitely need to make sure, and we've touched on this on previous episodes, that their wills and revocable trusts, if they're happening to leave everything to this person with disabilities, want to have those assets held in a special needs trust for that person rather than outright to that person. So just making sure all those types of wills, revocable trust documents where you're leaving assets, potentially beneficiary designations on life insurance policies and retirement accounts, making sure those are also naming the special needs trust rather than the person with disabilities as the designated beneficiary, all those types of things to make sure that that person with disabilities will have continued eligibility for things like Medicaid, which will provide those services that they might need to promote independence. Also, guardianship documents, as the person with disabilities has turned 18, ideally right before they turn 18, you want to make sure that if they lack the capacity to sign what's called a power of attorney, where they can name a person to handle their financial decision making for them, or a healthcare proxy, where they can name a person to handle their healthcare decisions for them, the parents will have to do a guardianship proceeding. Because even though you're the parents, when that person with disabilities becomes an adult, you don't have the legal right to make decisions for them unless you have a guardianship or unless you have a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy. So the guardianship proceeding is typically done in a surrogate's court or a probate court of some sort, where the judge essentially appoints the parent to be the guardian to handle those financial and healthcare decisions.
So, Heather, can you talk about some of the non-legal issues around financial and care continuity for that special needs person?
Yes. And really, these are kind of the questions and issues that I think a lot of parents of special needs children stay up at night worrying about. And the more you plan, and people who have special needs family members know this and are constantly doing this, but the more that you plan, the more you think these things out, and the more you communicate them, the better. From very early ages. So if you are getting up in the middle of the night and worrying about these things, write them down and talk to somebody about kind of how to organize your thoughts. So if you're putting the proper estate planning in place, and Rich mentioned guardianship, so that's for those who really have no capacity to handle things on their own. As the parents age, or the caregivers age, whoever is the person that's really kind of overseeing that special needs person and acting as guardian, you have to think about what if that person gets in a plane wreck, or what if they lose capacity, or something happens where they can no longer serve as guardian for that person. A parent can put successor guardian in any kind of document like a will, but they still need to be, that person still needs to be appointed by the court. So it's important, as the parents are planning their own estate plan and kind of making sure that everything's being handled for the special needs person, they should also be thinking about that successor and how are they going to communicate, all of the care needs, all of the preferences, all of the things that they're doing, and all of the key contacts that they have. So really, there are documents that you can put together that are very informal. They're not legal. Some people call them a letter of intent. Some people call it a transition plan or a care plan. But you put down all of the key contacts. So that would be attorney, your financial advisor, the caregivers, the people that are managing and overseeing the government benefits for your child, because the parents, if they're the guardians or they're the people that are not only overseeing the healthcare pieces of this, but also the financial piece, they're reporting constantly to the court,
Right.
to the entity that is overseeing the government benefits. So they're in touch with them. So they need to have all of that information and all of those key contacts for that successor. And even thinking about introducing that successor, and maybe it's a family member, to those key contacts early on, so that they have a relationship, they know who to go to, so there is no kind of gap or bump in the road when there if the transition is an unexpected time frame.
So I think Heather gave us a really good overview on succession of care. Rich, on succession of fiduciary roles, other kind of more formal things within documents, what do we have to worry about?
Yeah, you want to obviously make sure the successor trustees and fiduciaries that you're naming, ideally you want them to be around the same age, or at least at the same generation as the child, the special needs child, right? Because you don't want to be naming senior generations, because most likely those senior generations may not survive. So thinking things like that, they can be family members, of course. They usually are, quite frankly, family members. You could also have it where a family member helps with the kind of distribution decisions, because they know the special needs child best and what the distributions will be best for, and then have a sort of more independent trustee act as the investment person, the person who decides how those trust assets are invested, for instance, to allow those assets to grow, to manage the trust portfolio in a way that allows it to grow and last longer for that special needs child. So things like that are often thought about, and that you can have that in certain states split that decision making, so that it's easier, and you kind of have both sides. You have the more professional investing side of the trustee role, along with the more personal distribution side of the trustee role.
And I should probably point out that Wellspire Trust acts
Yeah,
in that role as the professional trustee.
that's right.
Heather, these conversations can be tough about the transition of care and who comes next and that kind of thing. Can you talk about how to facilitate those conversations and how to get them started?
It can be very difficult. Like I said, the sooner you start on any kind of planning for a special needs person, the better. So don't be afraid to have those conversations with family members. If it's not a family member, you're going to have to choose other people. And this is kind of where a lot of, the rubber meets the road, as they say. When people do their estate plans, I mean, everyone who has children of any ability worry about who am I going to name in case the parents pass away unexpectedly while that child is still a minor. And that oftentimes is what is the hang up for people doing their estate plan. I found when I was in private practice, that was the hardest question for most people. So when it's a vulnerable person that you really love and care about, and you are expending so much of your time and energy caring for them, it's even bigger question and an even bigger responsibility. So it's tough for a lot of people to choose those folks, and maybe you're going to have to pick several people in case someone's not able or unwilling at the time. Fortunately, in my family, my special needs daughter has a sister who adores her. We've set her up for success. So you kind of have to think about each of those successors as well, and think about, do they have the ability to oversee things? Where do they live? Are you going to provide some sort of financial support for them so that they can do this caregiving, or have you set things up where there's an alternative? So for example, if your special needs adult child is living with you, or you're paying for their rent, or, there's all different scenarios. Is there going to be a way for that to continue with the way that you've set up your estate plan, so that funds are available to continue that care and they don't have to come out of the successor's pocket or their estate plan? If there is a successor, again, there needs to be a discussion about their estate plan to make sure their assets are never counted toward that special needs person as well. So there's a lot to think about.
Yeah. So picking up on that, Rich, what are some of the other financial and estate planning tools we need to revisit at this stage, that, to make sure this is a smooth transition?
Sure. Yeah, I touched on it a little earlier, but yes, special needs trust, like Heather was mentioning. And just to recap, the special needs trust is essentially a trust for the special needs child. The special needs child is the sole beneficiary of that trust. And at the end, when the special needs child passes away, whatever remains in that trust can go to, let's say, the child's siblings or whoever else their parent may want the trust assets to go to. And the point of it is essentially to keep the assets available for the special needs child's use, but not basically make them ineligible for these government benefits like SSI and Medicaid, which will provide resources for them as adults. Same with beneficiary designations, making sure that, like I had mentioned before, you don't want to name that special needs child as one of the beneficiaries on your retirement account or your life insurance, because once you pass away and those assets vest in that special needs child, they're not going to be eligible for those benefits that we're talking about. Often I've seen families fund a special needs trust with life insurance on insuring their lives. So when they pass away, the life insurance proceeds get paid out to the special needs trust. And that works out nicely because the parent, while they're alive, they can still financially support. But when the parents are gone, obviously, that's life insurance. Those proceeds can help support after the parents are gone. So things like that all help to ensure the continuity of those important government benefits.
Yeah, and I should point out, we don't sell life insurance, so this isn't a sale technique. This is simply observing that this is one of the places that permanent life insurance is really well designed, right? And it means you can have a knowable amount going to the special needs trust. Somebody else is guaranteeing that, there's going to be a certain amount of death benefits. So you can take risk with other assets for other kids, perhaps other family members who don't have the same kind of fixed liabilities, and you can kind of manage the investment performance essentially that way for both kinds of needs for the family. So look, thank you very much, both of you. These transitions are not easy, but planning is really important to make them a bit easier. And the communication also is really key, because that's how people know the plan and can implement the plan. A secret plan that nobody knows about is not going to help anybody. So if your family is approaching this stage, now is the time to revisit that plan, your estate plan, ensure that your documents reflect your wishes, and to have the conversations with the people that will carry that plan forward. So thank you, Rich and Heather, for sharing your insights. Thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for our next discussion in the Navigating Special Needs series.